or each type of path a project could travel down in the process, right? Trying to identify, places where, there could be some lessons learned, things that could help move your project along a little bit quicker if you're aware of starting the process. As we've been adding in all of our meetings here is a portal moment, right? I think our portal is almost 4 years old now. We're 4 years old now, I think, exactly, for when it rolled out, but we are still making a ton of changes and improvements to it over time, right? And obviously we get people, coming to Massachusetts here, right, who are new to our tariff, our process, our portal. So we usually take some time to talk through a portal moment here that, give people a chance to maybe get a question answered that they didn't know that they really had, or help out as you continue to submit applications through that. We'll have some quick hitter communications at the end, just to make sure everybody's aware, and then we'll take an adequate amount of time to do Q&A at the end. So I saw that Jamie has already posted in the chat the link to the form where you can submit your questions, right? So we'll take all those questions through that form. Try not to post them in the chat. We are looking at the chat. We are monitoring it, but easier if everything populates in the same place, and we will spend some time addressing those questions at the end. So just diving into our quick safety moment here, right, is customary here in National Grid. We start all of our major meetings with safety moments and messages. This is the time of the year, right, where more boating is happening. Right, spending time, on boats on the weekends, right? We just came out of the 4th of July last week. We want to re-emphasize how important life jackets are as part of being on a boat, right? I want to say the age is 12, all right? So anybody under 12 needs to have a life jacket on at all times while on a boat. And then you need to have enough life jackets on the boat for anybody who's there, independent of age. So it's important to make sure that those life jackets fit, right? They're easily accessible. And just remember, right, even though if you are a good swimmer and you don't have any problems with those type of things, you never know what's going to happen in an accident, right? You can hit your head, become disoriented, right? If you're not able to swim, you don't have that life jacket on, you're not going to be able to float either. So keep that in mind. They need to be sized properly, especially when you get into the kid sizes, right? And then having to wear them, making sure that they're comfortable, but making sure that they're also useful, right, in case of any sort of situation overall. And then, I just want to add to this, right, because I heard a story the other day. Is actually a coach of a Major League Baseball team whose daughter had unfortunately passed away in a boating accident, not because of falling out of the boat and being injured, but because someone forgot to shut off the propeller as the boat was approaching. Right, waves can do a lot of things. They can move boats around, they move people around. So it's important to make sure that if you are boating and there are people in the water, you are very conscious of your propeller and your engine and those type of things to make sure that no, further issues happen until you can get that person safely back into the boat, and onto the float, whatever the situation is. So keep those things in mind. And then I just want to talk about COVID impacts. So it seems like something that doesn't ever really go away. Right, we're at two plus years here. We're still seeing impacts overall, right? But mostly those impacts are around supply chain, right? And I believe a lot of you, as we've been talking over the last year, have been seeing a lot of the same supply chain type issues. National Grid is not immune to that. So we are working with our procurement groups here in the company. We're working very closely with all of our vendors to make sure that we minimize what those impacts are, right, as we continue to move forward. We are also, and a lot of you may see if you've received an ISA recently, right? Those ISA timelines may be increased from what they used to be, right? And that's sort of a proactive attempt for us to take into account supply chain resource issues and impacts that we ultimately have, building it on the front end, giving everybody a chance to pre-plan for some of these extended durations. We are seeing issues with things, even like poles, right? We've had issues with certain pieces of equipment like reclosers in the past, right? But we're seeing equipment issues down through poles and nuts and bolts and transformers and those type of things that are core to basically every type of work National Grid does. Right, we are being aware, right? We're proactively working, adding different vendors and whatnot, making sure that we don't see major delays. But our hope is to not have to force majeure anything and be able to be put in the original ISA durations that we think are realistic. So that's something that we're still seeing. The good news is, right, is that we're mostly at blue sky here at National Grid. That's what we're working towards. Maybe things taking a little bit longer, but we are working in full capacity across the board everywhere, from the CEI team all the way through our operations, the meter groups and those type of things. So those impacts we were seeing very early on, a couple of years back, right, with people being sick and out for extended times. People are still unfortunately getting sick, but we are able to continue work as usual here. So just keep that in mind, right? That I think everybody's seeing supply chain issues across the board. So with that, I will hand it off to Jesse to dive into our simplified review process. I will reiterate here, right? Please put yourself on mute. No need to be on camera. And if you do have questions, please submit them through the form that is posted in the chat here. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday. My name is Yesenia Rosa. I also go by Jesse, and I will be going through the simplified process with everyone. Okay, first slide is in regards to the simplified criteria. The simplified criteria is the following. It is a UL listed inverter-based system with power ratings of 15 kW or less on a single phase service on a radial feed, or UL listed inverter-based systems with power ratings of 25 kW or less on a three-phase service on a radial feed. The simplified process does not apply for non-listed inverters or other generators, such as the induction, synchronous, and asynchronous inverters, or aggregate generation capacity of listed inverters that exceed the above-mentioned limits, or projects that do not pass the simplified process screen. Next slide, please. The process steps are the following. You submit your application in the simplified process. The tariff has been updated. It is now the 1468 that was updated last September, and we are going to be giving developers up until August 1st to upload all those forms, right, and get the ones that are reflected of the 1468 tariff, and replace the 1321s with the 1468. And that is going to be effective August 1st. The next step is the conditional approval, right? Once we review the application, review the transformer, we provide conditional approval for you to construct the system. If your system is a mass smart system, at the point of conditional approval, the mass smart, the case does populate the service upgrade form for that mass smart work order. So we do suggest that at that time you fill out that mass smart service upgrade form so that you can obtain the work order for that mass smart case. The next step in the process is your completion documents. At that time you would upload all your completion documents. We'll review the completion documents and ensure that the inspection on the mass smart work order is cleared. And in some cases, on net metering cases, there are some like revamp or service upgrade work orders that also need to be cleared before we can order the meter. Once we order the meter, we set the meter, and then your ATI email comes out. And then you have the link for the process steps right there at the bottom of this slide. Next slide, please. So the simplified review process path consists of the following. You submit your case. Typically, the portal will automatically give you the notification that the case has been submitted. And then we have 10 business days to review that case and provide that conditional approval to you. Once that is completed, your next step is the completion documents. You submit those documents. We also have 10 days to review those documents and set your order your meter to be set. Currently, the portal e-sign functionality is down. So we are suggesting that you download the application, the PDF version or the Word version, and submit a physical copy of that application because that e-sign functionality is down. We do have a notification on the portal advising of that functionality being down. And once it is back up and running, we'll remove that and the e-sign forms will be able to be used again. Next slide, please. All right, some common holds and concerns throughout the process. With the application part of the process, when you're submitting your application, please be mindful of your KWAC size, right? Enter the KWAC size at the triage correctly. That would be any inverter and AC coupled storage that you have, right, that you're going to be installing. The total KWAC should be entered in this field at the beginning of your triage questions. This will ensure that your case goes into the right path, whether it's simplified or expedited. If there is an existing system, also, please ensure that you are entering that information at triage. This is important for us because when we get the case, we're able to automatically see that there is an existing system at the premise, and then we'll be able to actually review the case accordingly, accounting the existing and also what's new and what's proposed to be installed. The next bullet is the application must match the customer's bill account, the name, the address, the account number, and the meter number as it is on the bill. So just ensure that your application does match, those fields do match what's on the bill. This again will help us and avoid a hold, right, on a case in regards to an account number or a name being incorrect or meter number being incorrect. The next point, customer billing account should be up to date and all obligations be met and or cleared. So at any point of your, at any step of your case, all obligations should be met and or cleared. It is very important to wait to construct the system until the conditional approval is issued, especially due to saturation that continues to, saturation in different parts of our territory continue to just go up. And so we want to ensure that before you install the system, we review the transformer and that transformer could hold, that DG that you're proposing on that system. So very important to wait until you get that conditional approval to then construct the system. The next bullet, all AC coupled storage should be noted on the application in the same section as the inverter. So we do require that the AC coupled storage is noted on the application. There are two fields on the application. You can use one to enter in the inverter information and then the second one to enter in your AC coupled storage information. In the next step of the process, at conditional approval, this is where your MassMart service upgrade form is populated. So if you complete that upgrade form, as I mentioned in the previous slide, you'll get that work order in time to then have the inspector clear it when they go out to inspect your service. If you wait to fill out that form at completion documents and submit both the completion documents and this form at the same time, this will now put a hold on your case, right? Because the inspection on the work order isn't cleared. It was just submitted with the completion documents. So we'll review everything, but we'll have to put it on hold because the inspection on that work order is still pending. If there is a system change after you have received conditional approval, please do enter a change review on the case. This is very important. This helps us capture all the changes right on the case and ensure that the case it entails or has the correct system size, right? And then when the ATI email goes out, your ATI email will show all the correct information. In many situations, change review is not submitted and it is missed, right? So then you get an ATI email with the incorrect information. We have to go back and correct all that. So it's very important that if your system changes, anything changes on it, that you do enter in that change review. And I do have a slide later on that will go over what that process is. Next slide, please. Some comment holds and concern continued here in regards to the conditional approval. We do suggest that the initial application be for the desired system size. And this again is due to the saturation, right? Request to increase system size after conditional approval will require a new transformer check, and it may result in your application case being taken out of the simplified process and then moved into the expedited process to then determine system modifications. So we do suggest that we try not to go up in size, right? Increase the size of a system after it's already been proposed. But we do understand that things happen, equipment may be not available, so that's also okay. The next bullet is if there has been a change in the account, the meter or size, enter the change review. Again, after the conditional approval, if any of that changes, do enter that change review. For the completion documents, have the work order inspection called before submitting your completion documents. As I mentioned before, this will just help us not, put a hold on the case, right? Your inspection would be called in, your completion documents come in, we review everything, there are no discrepancies, your meter's ordered. The next bullet, please ensure that the mass smart socket is wired correctly. The line on top should go to the utility meter and the load on the bottom to the inverter and panels. We do get a lot of mass smart sockets that are wired incorrectly. Our meter workers go out and the socket's not wired correctly. So it's very important that your installers do try and follow the installation process. Submit the payments via Clear Result for mass smart cases. Just a reminder, once your completion documents are in, once the case is interconnected, you still may have to submit those payment forms for the customer to the Clear Result website. So just a reminder not to forget to do that. Meter sockets are not allowed to be used as junction boxes. So just another reminder here that you cannot use a meter socket as a junction box. And then another reminder in regards to equipment adapters in the meter sockets. At no time should there be any equipment adapters installed in a meter socket in which a national grid meter is set. This is allowed on a separate customer-owned meter. However, the socket should be clearly labeled as such. So if you are going to put in like a backup switch into a socket, it cannot be on a socket where one of our gen meters or our net meter is going to be installed. It could only be a customer-owned meter, and we do ask that you label that socket with a placard that says customer owned. If the system is participating in Mass Smart, ensure that all the generation is captured by the Mass Smart meter when installing the system. Another bullet here, expansions of the interconnected Mass Smart projects are not allowed per the Mass Smart tariff. So that is a straight not allowed because the Mass Smart tariff is, or I'm sorry, the Mass Smart incentive is already set for that particular system size, so you can't add to that. And then the last bullet here is ensure that the paths are clear to the meter socket and any trees or bushes are cut around the meter. If there isn't a clear path to the meter, or there's a big bush or tree that's like covering the meter or the pathway to the meter workers will not install the meter. So just ensure that there is a clear path and that any trees or bushes are cut before you submit your completion documents so that that doesn't put a hold on your case. Next slide, please. All right, this slide is your change review slide. So for change reviews, we do ask that if there's a change with the sister size, the name, the account becomes finalized. There's a different meter that's going to be tied to the solar that the customer decided to go with a different meter instead of what you've submitted for. If you are adding Mass Smart or removing Mass Smart, um, if any of these things happen within your case, we do request that or require that you submit a change review. Once you submit the change review, or the process to submit the change review, right? You go into your case, you'll see the button for change review. You click that button, you enter in the information as to what's happening, what's changing. And then you can chatter us on the case, letting us know that the change review has been enabled. This will allow us to immediately, right, get your chatter, and then we'll be able to go in there, open the forms for you, and then at that point, we'll chatter you back, let you know the forms are opened. You'll go in there, upload your revised forms, revise the assets if needed. And once that's done, you again can let us know I've uploaded the forms, and we'll go ahead and review them for your change review. Next slide, please. Now here we'll go over some common concerns or some concerns after the case is interconnected. So the first bullet is making a net metering case Mass Smart or removing Mass Smart. So if the case has been interconnected and you want to make it a Mass Smart system, or you want to remove the Mass Smart meter, we have been seeing a lot of smart being removed because the incentive is super low. So you would enter a chatter on the case, letting us know what exactly you want to do, whether you're removing or adding Mass Smart. In the case that you are adding the Mass Smart, you would add the electrician role, pay the Mass Smart fee. We would populate that service upgrade form for you. You'll fill it out. We'll get you the work order number, and then you'll get the inspection on it. Once all that has been done and you provide us with a photo of the meter socket with proper placards, then we'll go ahead and get that meter, Mass Smart meter installed. If you're removing Mass Smart, then you would enter a chatter in the case or send us an email with a letter from the customer or even the letter from Clear Results saying that the customer or the case has been withdrawn from Mass Smart. Either one will suffice. And we'll go ahead into the case. We'll make the adjustments, and then we'll send a meter worker out to remove the Mass Smart meter. Once that Mass Smart meter is removed, it is the developer's responsibility to then go out there and remove the socket for the Mass Smart meter. And in some cases, developers are making that socket a customer-owned meter, which is also acceptable. And then you would update your one line, your as-built, your application, your photos to show that there's no Mass Smart. Wired to the wrong meter socket is the next bullet. If you come across your application, your case, and you realize, oh no, this is not the meter socket that it was supposed to be wired to, chatter us on the case with all the details. We'll open all the forms, and then you'll submit your revised documents to show what it is, what meter it is that you want to tie to, and then we'll review everything, and we'll get the net meter out in the field corrected and into the correct socket. Next slide, please. This slide is on the municipal inspection or your work order. You can view your work order under the related tab on your case. In some instances, you will have two work orders. This is when you have your Mass Smart work order, and then you also have a revamp work order. So in those situations or scenarios, then you would end up having to clear both of those inspections before we can move on to the next step of the case. Currently, we do know that there is the related tab is down and it is not showing you guys the work orders on your end, but we are working on that currently and hope to have that issue resolved ASAP. But in the meantime, you can always chatter myself or one of my representatives, and we will get that work order for you on the case. Next slide, please. Some common questions and concerns for residential storage. Both the solar and the AC coupled storage are included in the system size. This is something that I mentioned at the beginning when determining if a system will be simplified or expedited. The storage is not included in the size for net metering eligibility. So for example, if you have a 10 kW single phase solar system with 7 kW of AC storage, you would follow the expedited process because it is technically over 15 kW AC. However, you would still be you would not be capped exempt for net metering. It would still fall under the net metering because the inverter is a 10 kW inverter. In mass storage with net metered solar can charge from the grid, but it cannot export to the grid. So that is something that's important to know on the one line. If you are charging from the grid, you cannot export to the grid, and we do also require that the one line does state how you are charging and discharging. So all your one lines with storage should have that note: charging from PV or charging from grid, not exporting to grid, restricted export, unrestricted export. So we do require those notes. If the system is participating in mass smart, all generation must be captured by the smart meter, and the system should not be installed so it does not backfeed when the grid is down. The system should be installed so it does not backfeed when the grid is down. Next slide, please. In the event that you submit a case via the simplified path, it may be moved to expedited. If during the infrastructure review it is determined the proposed system will exceed the recommended electrical capacity of the service transformer, there are two options. In some cases, you can reduce the system size to be within the capacity remaining on the transformer. And if there is no capacity remaining on the transformer, then at that point you don't have a choice to reduce, right? It will go straight to the expedited process. And then it is reviewed for system modifications, and you get a estimation of what that modification would be. The expedited process includes a more comprehensive technical review. The technical review may identify national grid system modifications that are required to interconnect your system. The cost of any system modifications are the responsibility of the interconnecting customer, and system modification costs cannot be determined until the case is reviewed via the expedited path. Next slide, please. So some process reminders. When entering size at the triage part of submittal, only enter the KWAC generator size. For simplified cases, we have created a list of contacts, right, depending on the part of the process you're at and what the question is. So here you have the link as to where to find that information. So if you go to this link, you click on the chatter contact list. That list will give you pretty much all our representatives, who they are and what part of the process they work, right? And then you'll be able to chatter that representative and ask your question, and they'll be able to answer that. If enrolled in MassSmart, do not forget process continues through the career result for the submittal of the payment forms for customers to receive their MassSmart incentives. If a case starts as MassSmart, then it's changed to just net metering before interconnection. The change review should be entered, and then this will create a smoother COC processing, right? If you wait till to submit your completion documents to show us that you're not going with Mass Smart, that's going to put a hold on the case. You have to go through the change review, and then we'll be able to move forward once all that is completed. And the last bullet, enter the change review if there's been any changes to the case's application or the applicant information. Next slide, please. All right, that's the end for simplified process. Now I'll be passing it on to JJ for the screening process. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Jesse. Good morning, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jorge. I go by JJ, and I'm going to be covering the pre-application, application, and screening review processes with all of you this morning. So pre-applications are required for any proposed systems, 250 kW or greater. The required fees are listed here in the table. When submitting a pre-application, we require 4 pieces of information to be able to provide the completed report. This includes the proposed site location address, the aggregate system size, the generation type, and an uploaded screenshot using any web mapping platform like Google Maps, Bing Maps, the assessor's map. Pre-application reports are typically completed within 10 business days. During the pre-application, when you're reviewing the report, it provides all the feeder, circuit information, substation name, if it's in a network or non-network area, potential system constraints. We have multiple resources for developers to look up a lot of the information when determining to apply for new interconnections, like the hosting map or the heat map or anything like that. The pre-app report covers everything in a much more updated version, and it combines all that information, for the developers and customers to use. We also have resources internally that provide more up-to-date and more information, like it's on the next page, including if there's like ongoing feeder reconfiguration, substation challenges, and things that aren't really publicly visible. Next slide, please. So this is a screenshot of a completed pre-application report. This first page is where the circuit information lies, the proposed site system size, and all the information we just spoke about resides. And then on the second page, there's like all the different things that we look at that we try to provide the customers when they're reading a pre-app to determine if it feasible for you guys to move forward, including any ongoing ASO holds or ASO studies, any challenging interconnections, there are transmission studies going on, what process track the project would most likely follow, group study notes, and then next slide, please. And then on the third page, you have all these useful links that include like the standards for interconnection, distribution generation standards, electrical installation standards, and other helpful links when applying for interconnection. Next slide, please. The last 3 pages of the pre-application report are this detailed application checklist. It contains like all the different forms required for all the different size and of projects, ranging from expedited to standard to CHP. It's organized by size and generation type. It details where in this tariff or in our ESB standards you can find additional details for the required equipment. By reviewing everything on the list and by reviewing everything on the pre-application, it prevents a lot of holds for any projects moving forward. Next slide, please. Once the pre-application has been reviewed and accepted by a developer customer, you can then submit for an interconnection application. Interconnection applications are required for all projects. Currently for complex projects, we have a couple of portal updates in the works that are gonna help facilitate some of the ongoing things we have. Like currently, when you apply online, you could submit the application online, and then you have that full application form. We're currently working to update that to the 1468, which is the new tariff that Jesse mentioned. That way, you don't need both of them moving forward with complex jobs. And in addition, they're working on the e-sign. That way, you don't have to download the PDF, print it, sign it, and then scan it back in. So once those 2 things are implemented, we'll be able to have you submit everything online, and you won't need redundant forms attached to those forms in the application. Applications are all completed and reviewed within 10 business days. All application submissions require a completed application form, the application fee paid, a billing account number, detailed system size, the different equipment assets that are going to be used for the system, account location, site plan, line diagram, site control documentation, tech sheets, and then the legal information document. For larger projects and for all standard projects, additional forms are required, including any curtailment letters for any inverters that need to be derated or limited, anti-allening forms, UL certificates, low rejection over voltage letters, and if the project has storage, we would need a battery storage narrative and an ESS checklist. And all of these documents are detailed in the app review checklist at the end of the pre-application. Next slide, please. This slide outlines some of the most commonly missed details during the application review process that lead to projects being placed on hold. Some of the issues are usually document discrepancies, missing billing account numbers, Complete anti-islanding forms for larger projects need to be submitted in their entirety. And then curtailment letters for derating. Some of the most common documents. And then for line diagrams, some of the things we see most common that are missing that get placed on hold are inverter and interrupting device nameplate rating, relay settings, make, model, and voltage, the internal DG protected device settings, missing electrical engineering PE stamps, the aggregate, system size. And then on the site plan, things that we see omitted are the point of interconnection, the point of common coupling, company pole nearest to the proposed PCC. And we get questions on why that's important. Like, well, do we have the company pole information? And we do, but sometimes when you're on a site and you guys are proposing to come from a different area, it's good for us to know where you guys plan on building. And it just helps us provide more accurate data. And then the access road notes that include, a note just saying that we have 20 feet wide accessibility, which is part of our clearance requirements. Next slide, please. So some of the guidelines during applications, when people submit things, we like to let them know up front, like we won't provide any transformers larger than 300 kVA or when primary metering is the least cost to serve option for standalone systems. All commercial meters and disconnects need to be grouped together. Existing metering location on pad mounted transformers will be required to be relocated when applying for a new standalone DG system. No MA Smart meter installations require disconnecting means on both the line and load side of the meter. Any MA Smart system over 500 kW requires energy storage. AC couple projects require individual meters for the PV, energy storage system, and utility meter ahead of the entire system. All final metering locations and equipment locations will be determined by the metering department, and they're going to differ depending on the site configuration. All expedited cases that need further study are going to require all of the same documents that are required for standard projects because they will require the same detailed study as a standard project. And no work should begin until the metering department has approved final disconnect and metering locations on site with whoever is building the project. Next slide, please. Once the application has been deemed complete, we would progress the project to screening. Screening is required for all expedited and standard projects. During the screening review, we determine if the project can interconnect without requiring a detailed study for any projects in the expedited path under 250 kW that aren't in an area with an ongoing study. Any projects 250 kW or larger require further study. At a minimum, they need a grounding review. So during the screening review, we take a detailed look at the proposed system configuration, area system infrastructure, provide corrections, feedback about system configurations before we progress any projects. And then we also check to see if the project's on a radio network system, if the equipment is all UL 1741 SA listed, which is soon to be SB listed. And does the DG on system pass substation backfeed and islanding screenings? If any of the screening checkpoints fail, National Grid requires further study before an interconnection service agreement. Some of the other reasons a project under 250 kW could require further study could be that it could be part of, or it could be ongoing, or it could be behind an ongoing area that has a potential group study. Group studies process going to be detailed a little bit later on. And then most 4 kV projects require further study. Every proposed project on a network or non-effectively grounded system requires further study. Next slide, please. And then these are some of the other reasons that potential system constraints that could lead a project to further study, which includes group studies, challenging feeders, lack of hosting capacity, if you're in an area with a feeder reconfiguration, any ungrounded, non-effectively grounded feeders in HT lines, any area where there's planned substation work, feeder or DG saturation or DG penetration. Next slide, please. And that is all for those processes. I hand this off to Mr. Michael Armel to talk over the expedited review process.
Thanks, JJ. Okay, we'll begin with the first slide, please. The expedited criteria. For expedited cases, we look at single-phase customers with listed single-phase inverter-based systems with power ratings greater than 15 kW on a radial feed, as well as three-phase customers with listed three-phase inverter-based on systems with power ratings greater than 25 kW on a radial feed, as well as any project that did not pass the simplified process screens. So as Jesse covered with a lot of the simplified projects, a lot of those cases that do not pass every screen would now then become expedited projects. And we are, following a lot of the same steps that she covered. But because of, again, the saturation transformers and the local level, we will follow this path. So non-simplified projects that do not require an impact study, maximum size of supplemental review is based upon the review of the screens. We must begin using the DPU 1468 forms when submitting application and closeout packages. So we're just trying to get that that moving forward as we get into this 2022. A reminder: a simplified section of this presentation can be reviewed for any concerns and questions that would have the same impact on residential systems that fall in the expedited process. As I mentioned earlier, quite a few of our expedited projects are residential homes that haven't followed, that have not passed all of the simplified screens. Next slide. The interconnection process steps. So we begin with for a pre-application, if any project is greater than 250 kW, we then would go to the application stage where we verify that it will follow an expedited path. We'll do the app review, and then it will hand off to screening for engineering review. If further review is required with distribution design, would then follow supplemental review. And then that information would go into our ISA via the conditional approval and approval to construct the DG system. Any construction that's needed on our end will then take place. When the completion documents are ready to be set in, we will typically not follow the witness test process. We'll use the commissioning memo in lieu of that. That will be part of the completion document package that's submitted. We review all the documents and order the meter or meters. Once those are set, we will then deliver the authorization to interconnect, and that will be delivered via email. Next slide. Okay, the expedited review path. We do require that we have listed inverters. When we do first receive that application, we have 3 days to acknowledge that. That is done automatically via the portal and via email. So you'll get that quickly turned around. There's a 10-day business day turnaround to review applications, not including any times things are put on hold for deficiency, et cetera. Upon completion of the application review, it would then go to a 25 business day screening time with our engineers. If it's then determined that a supplemental review is needed, 20 business days is given to distribution design to complete a supplemental review. At the completion of either of those two paths, we would then deliver the ISA within 10 business days. So the total maximum time frame is a 45 business day turnaround if no supplemental review is required, and 65 business days if we do require a supplemental review. If it's determined that any construction is needed, we will have a construction schedule that's listed on the ISA, depending on the scope of work that's involved. Again, typically on our expedited cases, we will not use the notice witness test. We will use the commissioning memo in lieu of that for these projects that are under 500 kW. Next slide, please. For expedited projects, there are some common areas that we do see in completion documents. The commissioning memo, many times it may not match what comes in on a one line. We want to have the on company letterhead, we want the dates and the names to match on the as-built. So we want that to be in agreement with that other piece, as well as the commissioning memo should have a few specifics. that it passes the 2-second shutdown when disconnect is open test, as well as the 5 minutes before restart when disconnect is closed test. Excuse me. As well as confirm system matches the as-built and include the most recent version of the as-built. We do require that the inverter relay frequency chart is in trip time settings is also included on that commissioning memo for our review. Next slide. The as-built must be PE stamped and signed and dated by the same person who performed the commissioning test. Again, as I mentioned before on that last form, they should agree. For pictures, the photos, the meter picture should show the permanent plaque visible at eye level that includes a warning about the generator installed. Also, if the AC utility disconnect switch is not grouped with an adjustment adjacent to the utility revenue meter, then a permanent plaque is visible at eye level that clearly identifies the location of the AC utility disconnect. So anytime we don't have meters where there is a grouping of production meter, utility meter, AC disconnect. Again, this is for our first responders, not just National Grid personnel, where the locations of everything, we need to be able to locate that from one location. And if there's something around the corner, we need to discover it at the first location. Next slide. For projects that are greater than 60 kW, we do require evidence of insurance in Massachusetts. So you can refer to your ISA and as well as the tariff for insurance requirements that is all listed there. For any project that is connecting as a qualifying facility, we'll be looking for the Schedule A form, the W-9 form, as well as ACH for payments, supplier enrollment form. Again, these are all projects greater than 60 kW, and then we can then move asset registration. Next slide, please. No equipment or adapters between the meter and the socket and a meter socket. So again, not using as junction boxes for any of our equipment. Projects greater than 60 kW mass will require interval metering, our wireless or phone line. So we do have to receive a wireless signal test on a Verizon network, at least 4G signal, so that we can then have this read remotely. In the case where this is somewhere very rural or encased in behind a wall where it just can't be read with that wireless signal, phone lines can be used, but they must be dedicated and terminated at the meter location, and the line must be 100% copper. Fiber lines will not communicate properly, and that's something that we should be communicating about that early on in the project to make sure that our metering department can get out there, review that, and approve that we're going to go with a dedicated line rather than a wireless setup, and also verify that we just can't get a wireless signal out there. Regardless if it's going to be a wired meter or a wireless meter that's interval read, it is a long time lead time item, and the prep time can be 10 to 12 weeks. So it's important to walk through this with the job owner well in advance of when you intend to seek authority to interconnect. And you can find that wireless test in our forms, and that can be attached to a screenshot from your cell phone that shows the local signal. Thank you. Okay, Jared will continue with the standard review process. Thank you.
Hey, Mike, can you hear me?
I can, Jared. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Jared D'Souza. I'll be going through the standard review process. So the standard criteria is anything greater than 500 kW. It's going to require a distribution system impact study. If it requires substation modifications, if you're not using any listed inverters or generators, if you're using induction, synchronous, or asynchronous generators, most CHP systems, and then any project that does not qualify this for the simplified or expedited process. Next slide. So the process steps, same as the other, well, actually anything over 250 requires the pre-application. Then the standard application, the engineering review, whether it be just the impact study or if it also requires the detailed study. Then we'll be going to conditional approval, design, pre-construction requirements, company construction, witness test and completion/compliance documents, meter installation, registering the assets with ISO New England, and then the authority to interconnect. Next slide. So pretty similar, but still a little bit different. The standard review path. So we have 3 business days to, or 3 days to acknowledge receipt of the application. We have 10 days to review the application for completeness. Then the complete the standard process initial review takes about 20 days. We have 5 business days to send the impact study agreement. Complete the impact study is 55 to 60 days, or if needed, it will be mutually agreed upon to extend that timeline. And if it's really needed, there's the detailed study, which can range from 30 to 60 days or longer, if again, needing mutual agreement for a longer timeline. We then draft the ISA, which is 15 days. And if it is standard, it would be 200 days at this point or longer based on those mutual agreements. And construction schedules vary depending on the amount of work is required. And then there's the witness testing. So it's 10 days from the company approval of the witness test procedures or by mutual agreement, and 5 days to review the witness test results afterwards. Next slide. So standard review path reminders, the impact study, and if the detailed study is required, they will determine the electrical impact on the company's system with the required system modifications and associated cost. If greater than 1 megawatt, the customer's applications will be presented to ISO New England at the 20 business day of the impact study, and it will be on ISO hold or ASO hold until the ISO New England provides approval and or the ISO study is completed. And the project size is based on the nameplate rating and system can be aggregated. So if it's next to another project without any load in between, it would be aggregated. If the application is between 1 and 5 megawatts and does not require a full transmission study, it would be a GNF package or a generator notification package. And if it's greater than 5 megawatts and or requires a full transmission study, it'll be a PPA or a proposed plan application, and the supporting transmission proposed plan application, or the TPPA. If substation modifications are required, the company has 60 business days for that study. If estimated construction costs are greater than 1 million, the study timeline could be mutually agreed, and it would be notified at the 20 business day review. Inside the ISA, there will be an estimated construction schedule / timeline that will have a little bit more detail, and that's done after the study is completed. If a detailed study is required, the customer may request an early ISA, which will not have a construction timeline in it. And per the MDPU 1468, the tariff, first kayak payment is due within 60 business days. That's new. It used to be 120 business days, and the kayak payments no longer have the 30 business day cure period. Design begins after the first kayak payment has been made, and easements, permitting, right-of-way, et cetera, begin after design and are required to move into construction. If third parties do not agree to the design, it can result in a restudy or a redesign. Next slide. Witness test and completion / compliant documents. Most recent checklists are found on the website, and documents can be approved in advance, but all must be provided before the review can begin. For any specific questions, please reach out to your account manager. And the most recent witness test checklist was from May of 2020 and includes pictures of the nameplates. All checklist requirements must be approved, and both National Grid and customer construction must be completed with the municipal inspection called in prior to scheduling a witness test. And then the compliance document checklist, the asset registration are required as part of the compliance documents. National Grid applies for asset registration on behalf of the customer. It takes typically between 5 and 10 business days, and 5 is the absolute minimum. It doesn't let us select a date earlier than that. All incentive projects, qualifying facility, net metering greater than 60 kilowatts require asset registration with ISO before ATI is granted, because we cannot backdate QF / net metering payments. Behind the meter class 2 and 3 net metering and demand response systems are exempt from being registered as settlement only generators with ISO. And if the AC battery standalone system is generating power to the grid, it needs to be registered separately with ISO. Next slide. And document revision and restudy reminders. Whenever new one lines or site plans are submitted, all changes, including text changes, should be clouded. And the revision block, including the revision number and date, should also be updated. One lines and site plans need to have the PE stamp as per the ESB 756. If making changes after the study has been finalized, the customer needs to inform National Grid of the changes via change request button on the portal and provide revised documents to determine if a restudy would be necessary. The restudy will have associated costs and timelines. Restudies can cause impacts to project costs and timelines, even if the scope of work doesn't change. Please refer to the moderate/significant change guidelines prior to submitting your change at that link right there. And then if an ISA has already been executed, the company's design construction process may be put on hold for the duration of the restudy and until the ISA amendment has been fully executed. Re-evaluation of the company's construction schedule may be necessary and will be determined after the full execution of the amendment. Next slide. And then important target dates for customers requesting end of year. By October 1st, you have to submit the following documentations: proposed witness test procedure and energization plan, any additional witness test documents available, wireless test, meter test, or meter phone number as applicable. And then by November 15th, the company or complete distribution generation facility construction, and also submit all outstanding documentation. Note that the witness test requirements were updated as of May 2020, and all completion documents must be submitted prior to review. Images must be properly labeled and in their correct forms. Next slide. Meeting these target dates does not guarantee end-of-year interconnection for your facility. However, it does give the company a better opportunity to meet your request. These target dates have been established based on the company's experience with delays to end-of-year processing, including necessary engineering review of initial plans and documentation, as well as multiple subsequent reviews and communications with interconnecting customer as necessary to achieve the interconnecting customer's compliance with requirements, queuing and resourcing allocation for both witness test scheduling and meter installations, fewer processing days due to state holidays and weather conditions, and required registration with ISO New England for projects over 1 megawatt that must be processed prior to ATI, and interconnecting customer delay in starting the registration process in a timely manner. The interconnecting customer's planning and cooperation is essential to this process. Please keep in mind that the company will not issue ATI until the interconnecting customer has satisfied all interconnecting requirements, including without limitation, the wiring inspection, the compliance documents, the witness test, and the ISO registration, and required company meters installed. And then if you have any more questions, you can go to that link below. Next slide. So no really introduction slide, but I'm going to pass over this to Jen Chalifo, who's going to take over the campus interconnections.
Thanks, Jared. Oh, go back one. So just wanted to introduce you to a new document that we've uploaded to our technical requirements page after receiving some applications that we were seeing some challenges as it relates to our ESB standards. The company had some extensive conversations around these extraordinary circumstances and came up with a path forward that aligned with our safety and reliability standards. So in front of you is a roster of these requirements and considerations relative to billing, meter installations, and the engineering assessment for projects connecting behind a single metering point in a campus environment. So just some important highlights. The customer is responsible to pursue any exceptions or confirmations or to remedy any conflicts that align with the requirements of the governing entity behind the market or incentive program that they're intending to pursue. Relative to meter, a placard is required showing the campus map inclusive of all meter locations on the campus at the primary meter location So for sub-metering across the campus, which is part of this solution, we do require a placard at the primary meter location identifying the location of all meters on the property. All meters are required to be read wirelessly. There will be no exceptions. And a separate review of meter requirements or location may be required depending on the complexity of the solution or design. So we may have to allot for some time for metering folks to sort of put feet on the street and check out the locations of the meters. Again, this is to make sure that we're aligned with our safety and reliability standards, because that is obviously paramount. So in terms of engineering assessment, any individual application greater than 250 kW on a campus, or any generators that aggregate over 500 kW will be required to go through impact study. And where more than one application is received at a time, we will study those in the group format. Let's see, aggregated point of control for all DG on campus. The campus will need to take ownership of any aggregation point for National Grid to be able to take campus offline when necessary. And then we will ask the campus to provide any necessary information, including campus topography, feeder impedance information, distribution equipment, nameplate information, locations, and nameplate information for all campus DER. So again, this is uploaded to our interconnection documents page for reference. If you have any questions, let us know. Next slide. And everyone's favorite topic as of late, group study. We did want to include a path for you to get to some group study general information. Here we have a link to our group study order for reference. Each group member is encouraged to review the group study provisions to understand the full scope of the process and requirements throughout group study. The company will always provide visibility and communication in accordance with the tariff, and group members are responsible to understand their individual responsibilities. Next slide. In relation to group study, we wanted to provide you just a high-level summary of timelines associated. Typically, our group windows will be 40 business days. They are not to exceed 40 business days and can be closed sooner than 40 business days in accordance with the group study order. We do have a scoping meeting within 20 business days of all completed screens. Typically, that scoping meeting just gives a high-level overview of what we're seeing for the area impacts, introduces the group study process and any caveats to the group study methodology that we want to introduce to the group members or potential group members at that point. 10 business days is when the order expects group or potential group members to notify the company whether or not they wish to proceed. Within 2 business days after the expiration of that milestone, the company will ask group members or those that express intent to proceed whether or not they'd like to proceed with an extended group study or proceed with the regular group study timeline. An extended group study offers a refined study estimate, and it does expand the timeline. Once we get answers from all potential members relative to the extended group study or the expiration of that 5 business day response timeline, we would issue invoices and agreements to all potential members within 15 business days, and likewise expecting those responses and payments for group study in the 15 business days following. So important to note here that there is no cure period for group study payments, which is a little bit different than the DG interconnection tariff. So I did want to call that out. Group members have the opportunity to petition with unanimous consent for an extension to any timeline, but it does need to be unanimously consented to. After we receive completed agreements and payments for group study, depending on the number of applications and the potential system modification costs, you could fall into one of 3 buckets in terms of study duration: 100 business days, 125, or 160 as depicted here. Next slide. So here's where we introduce a little bit of variation. The company has committed to an approximate 70 business day timeline to deliver high impacts and associated thresholds to group members. This is not an order-driven timeline. This is a company business practice. We've identified that at approximately 70 business days, we should have enough of the engineering in the group study complete to identify whether or not there are members that aren't participating in the impacts or benefiting from the modifications. So some of your smaller size projects that could potentially be carved out of the solution may be notified at this point. In addition, we will be communicating those high-level impacts and associated thresholds that may impact the operation of your generator and or battery. And conversations with group members will commence at this point as to our path forward and the study methodology chosen by group members. Now, just important to note, again, this timeline could vary based on your total study duration. So our 70 business days is our estimated timeline within the 160 business day timeline. It could be abbreviated slightly if we have a shorter timeline overall, which is indicative of fewer members, which, you know, obviously makes sense. So this is also typically, as of today, where the ASO study begins. So we will discuss high-level impacts. We will discuss, you know, study methodology going forward relative to distribution. But at this point, we should also have responses from ISO in terms of their study requirements, and we will likely hand off the study from distribution to transmission for those efforts. This is a separate invoice. It is a separate initiative, and as such, the study timeline on the distribution side goes on hold. Also important to note that we do expect PSCAD models for any project over 1 megawatt and PSSE models for all projects over 5 megawatts for any project participating in the ASO study. So the alternative is to withdraw your application if you are over 1 megawatt and choose not to proceed with the ASO. So if you have questions around model requirements, those requirements are also posted to our interconnection documents page for reference, and we're happy to answer any questions that may come up relative to that as well. So once the ASO study completes, we hand it back off to our distribution engineers to finish the balance of the distribution analysis. Once we deliver Once we're ready to deliver a distribution impact study report, we will convene group members to have that conversation before they actually see the document. We'll review it at a very high level just to make sure there's no questions that can be answered before you actually see the document. Those documents will be uploaded to your case. Once the documents are uploaded, we would give 15 business days for group members to submit any document revisions. This is an important timeline because this is a little bit different than the independent study timeline. Because this timeline impacts all group members because we're delivering ISAs to the group as a whole, we do need to stick to the 15 business day strict timeline for document submissions. So be on the ready to manipulate your documents in accordance with the recommendations in your individual study report and return those to the company. We will commit to a 10 business day timeline to turn around those document reviews. And subsequent to those timelines, we will turn around and deliver an ISA within the 25 to 35 business day timeline in accordance with the group study order. And then, of course, there's 20 business day timeline for customers to sign and return the ISA. Anything beyond the delivery and the return of the ISA follows the regular tariff Mass DPU 1468 timelines. Next slide. Just a couple of reference points relative to group study. We do have a group study map uploaded. Currently, it is a stagnant map we're uploading monthly. In very short order, we will be moving that map to our hosting capacity maps as a separate tab. It will be color-coded and will be providing some dates high level as to group study start, We are working on an FAQ document. We've gotten several questions around group study, and we're working through completing the answers to all of those questions that we've received so that we can get an FAQ document uploaded as soon as possible. And we do also have some group study help documents around how to identify other members in the group. And we've provided that help document also on the interconnection documents page, but the link is also here in this presentation. So I will now hand it over to Lorna, who will be talking through our connected customer portion.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Jen. My name is Lorna Burnett, and I'm a senior specialist with the DER Connected Customer Team. Next slide, please. Our vision is to make it as easy to be a customer with a connected distributed energy resources as it is to be a traditional electric grid customer. Our mission is to prepare National Grid for a time when more than half of our customers have DER equipment or participate in a DER incentive program. Some of our goals are to be managing and improving the user experience within the application portal, and then also managing and improving business processes, communications, customer requests, and National Grid customers hosting connected DER equipment or participating in the incentive programs. Next slide, please. As a connected customer team, we have tried to determine or establish a better way to communicate with us, to get in touch directly with us. Who can contact us? The system owner, the host customer, or any type of third parties who are affiliated with the project can use the new form. And how do I know if my project is connected? This would be something that either you would receive an ATI letter, the authority to interconnect. You would be registered with ISO if applicable, and you would receive your first bill and transfers. If all of the above criteria met, then you would be trying to reach out to the connected customer team. Next slide, please. The best way to get in touch with us would be to go to the above link, and also it's the National Grid Customer Application Portal, NCAP. On the lower right-hand side is a Contact Us link, and this is where you can click into to submit an inquiry to us. Once the inquiry is submitted with all of the applicable information, there are some required forms, fields there, and then you can attach any documents as needed. You'll hit submit, and you will receive a confirmation email that your request has been received. Next slide. We also have some of our forms located in the post interconnection field. Next slide. Once you click into post interconnection, you'll come to this screen, which says home, Massachusetts, New York, or submit an inquiry. So you would just simply click on the Massachusetts post interconnection. And then it'll be a variety of topics with some knowledge information as well as the needed forms. So if you're looking for an allocation change request form, that would be under the Massachusetts Credit Allocation Change Request or Inquiry field. Next form. So credit allocation change request, there are a couple different forms that we provide. Just a general reminder, the Schedule Z and the AOBC forms can be submitted 4 times per calendar year. For net metering, there would be the Schedule Z or a one-time transfer form. And just as a reminder, please try to update these forms as, or use these forms from the portal as often as you can. We do often update them, and it's best to use the most up-to-date versions. For the net metering complex, there's the Schedule Z and also the spreadsheet if you're going to be allocating to multiple satellite accounts, the one-time transfer form, an account removal form, an account swap form, again, and then we have the AOBC credit form, which is the alternative on-bill credit form. Next slide, please. There is a lot of miscommunication around a Schedule Z versus a one-time transfer request form. So once again, the Schedule Z can be submitted 4 times per calendar year. The change for the Schedule Z would be to the percent of the allocation to a satellite customer. So that would be based on the generation per month. And please be sure when you're submitting the Schedule Z to complete Section E, which would indicate how you would like these transfers to be processed, whether they would be staying on the host account, be transferred to satellite customers, or a combination of both. Then on page 3, if you are choosing to designate them to a satellite account, this is where you would put the information on page 3. Page 4, we would require signature and date. The one-time transfer request form, this is used to transfer excess credit balance from your account to another account on a one-time basis. This must meet the mass load zone requirements and be transferred to a National Grid electric account. There is a listing for the mass load zone on the NCAP portal. You can just simply put that into mass load zone into the search bar, and then that would help you determine if you're able to transfer it to that satellite account or not. The request needs to be made in dollar amounts versus a percentage, and it's up to the amount that is available at the time of processing. Again, a signature and date are required on those forms. Next slide, please. The drop-down menu topics that are available. So once you go into the inquiry form and you are clicking that yes, your project has been connected, these are the topics that will drop down. So again, these are for connected projects. And I think Jesse had mentioned earlier that if you're looking for to submit an inquiry for a project that has not been connected or is still in the application phase, you would hit no here. You would select no button and it would give you different topic criterias. For this particular topics, you could have billing inquiries, which would be if you had questions about when you're receiving your bills, if your bills are late, if you're having discrepancies about your bills, credit allocation inquiries, how do I change my allocations? I don't know my meter number, if there's any particular questions regarding your credit allocations. Transfer of ownership, if you're selling the project or you're moving out of a residential account, you would submit the forms there. Power quality, high voltage. If you're having any problems with your voltage or spikes, if you are tripping offline or need to have some meter inquiries done, this would be where you would submit that. And then the credit allocation change request would be just submitting the allocation forms. Other post-interconnections would be if you have any other questions. This would be the category if you want to change your ACH forms, if you want to change your banking information. And then we also have the system terminated decommissioned section. So if you have any questions for the post-interconnection or the DER connected customer support team, this is where you would go to submit those inquiries. Next slide. And I think we're going to be handing this over to Marissa Soretti for the portal moment.
Thanks, Lorna.
Sure.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marissa Soretti, and I am the Massachusetts Portal Specialist. Next slide, please. So I did want to highlight on this slide specifically, just making sure you're entering your assets accurately based on your application configuration of your project. So recently, within the last few months, National Grid has made some changes to the customer application portal, specifically to the equipment selector that is associated with your application form. In an effort to accommodate new technology and new equipment types, we did create a new asset record type called AC Power Producing. There are several guidance documents as well as a PowerPoint presentation located on our Storage Assistance Knowledge page that can provide you step-by-step instructions on how to use this new button based on your application configuration. So just as an example, application configuration can be considered new application for generation without storage or with storage. So the link to the PowerPoint is posted on that page. Just to give you a visual, I did include a screenshot just so you know where it is located. And if you have any questions about this process, please reach out to your National Grid case owner or use the Contact Us button. Next slide, please. So just a gentle reminder, entering assets throughout the lifeline of your interconnection application. So just ensure that through the lifeline of your project that assets are listed, are up to date. This includes, but it's not limited to, any curtailment, derating, or limiting export of power. In the instance there is a change in your assets after they've already been entered and approved, please reach out to your case owner so they can reopen the equipment selector for you to modify or remove any existing assets. If you are upgrading the size of your system after your system size has already been approved, please follow the regular change process. And just make sure when entering assets during the application draft phase of your project, if you're referencing the technical specification sheets for your equipment, failure to enter your equipment accurately will result in a delay in the processing of your project. Next slide, please. So there also have been some changes made to the customer application portal. So effective May of 2022, National Grid is no longer handling the Rhode Island jurisdiction. There have been changes to the portal, like I stated, as a result of this sale. So when you do go to the NG US Force website, which is the customer application portal, it is going to redirect you and verify which jurisdiction you are attempting to access. Next slide, please. So for portal users that enter applications in both jurisdictions, please keep in mind that your login information has been updated so you can successfully enter inquiries as well as applications for National Grid, as well as Rhode Island Energy, because these interfaces are technically shared. So just to show you, this screenshot is a fake National Grid user. It's being used for example purposes only. So if you are noticing when you register that your username starts with CAP versus NG as it used to, this is not a mistake. This is built so developers are able to use both platforms and are able to enter applications for both jurisdictions. Next slide, please. And as well, so when you enter the customer application portal for our side, Massachusetts and New York, you're going to notice that the Rhode Island tile has been removed. As you scroll down, because it is public knowledge, we do have access to feeders and infrastructure records. Like I stated, these platforms are shared, so you are going to still be able to see Rhode Island infrastructure from this page as well. Just a reminder. Next slide, please. And then as well, you will also notice when you attempt to submit an interconnection application for Rhode Island, you're going to receive the following validation error that Rhode Island applications are going to be handled by Rhode Island Energy. Please go over to the Rhode Island side of the portal to submit your application. This is also the same for inquiries as well. So if you had inquiries or needed to submit an application for the state of Rhode Island, just make sure that you're using the correct portal to do so. Next slide, please. And I'll hand it off to Will for general communications. Thank you.
Thanks, Marissa. Thanks, everybody so far. So I'll dive into these pretty quickly before we get into the Q&A. I will start off by saying we did originally have this invite out for 11:30. Myself and the National Grid team will gladly continue to stay on and work through the questions, right? But understanding that other people may have to drop for other commitments overall, right? This will be, it has been recorded, right? Will be posted. We will also take the Q&A and post a Q&A doc for others to be able to review also. So keep that in mind, but we will end up going over past 11:30 for a little bit. But I wanted to touch on a couple of quick hitters here. Things that we've been seeing and noticing, and some dates that may be pertinent. So the first one is around access to company equipment on these sites, right? So National Grid needs 24/7 access to be able to get to any company-owned equipment, right? So we do not need to get to customer-owned equipment, but that line of demarcation where the primary meter is, we need to have access to that primary meter, any other equipment that leads back to the electric power system, right, where it's connected in. So what we have experienced here recently is we've come up to some gates that have prevented us from being able to access with our trucks, right, a pole or two, right, right, of National Grid owned equipment. So if that's the case, if your gate does line up ahead of that line of demarcation between customer-owned and company-owned equipment, that's absolutely fine. That is not a problem. We just need to make sure that it's double locked, right? And that is a lock that National Grid will provide. And then you would just install. And if and when we need access to that equipment, we have our keys. We'd be able to unlock our lock, access the equipment, and then lock everything back up afterwards. So if that is a situation that you have, right, and you only have it single locked at this point, right, definitely reach out to the job owner that you've been working with. We do have access to those locks, and we can find a way to get them over to you. The next one, right, has been a topic of conversation in the TSRGs. So there is a link to the website here in case you have not been part of those TSRG meetings and conversations so far. But starting January 1st next year, 2023, specific systems are going to require the UL 1741 SB inverters. So that is an impactful date, right? As that change we made, and it will have an impact on our app review, the work that JJ and his team is doing, and we'll drive specific feedback. So that's a date to keep in mind, and further information is available through that link. Another couple things. So on a yearly basis, we post typical system modification costs, right? So that happened, a couple weeks ago on July 1st. So you can see what the updated cost for, again, typical system modifications, right? Depending on what your project ends up getting into, you can piece those together to give yourself a ballpark of potential cost from there. And then, hosting capacity maps are going to be updated here on or before August 1st. So that update is being actively worked on now and will be available here in the next few weeks. Couple other ones, right, is site as-built accuracy. What we have seen is, issues. I think supply chain is driving a lot of this, to my earlier comments as part of this meeting. But I think supply chain has driven some of this where the as-built coming in may not match a couple of things, right? Match what was originally submitted and studied initially by National Grid, and may not actually be what's out in the field. So wanted to take the opportunity and reinforce the importance of the as-built, right, and making sure that it accurately depicts what is in the field, and that it matches everything that's been studied to date. So what we don't want to do is get to the very end of the process when those as-builts are being submitted and reviewed, and we notice something that's off, right? Then that just puts the whole process to a halt. We'll have to review it, figure out what's going on, right? Any sort of changes need to be discussed long before we get to that point in the process, and addressed at that time. So keep that in mind. It is something we bring it up here because we've seen it happen enough times recently where that matching is just not happening, right? Leading to situations where sites have come online and then had to come offline later, and running into issues about getting them back online because we've had discrepancies between as-builts, right? Studied, original study documents and what's actually built out in the field. The last thing I want to bring attention to is an escalation process that we have internally here at National Grid, right? So what this is set up for, right, is not everything has to be a production overhaul with many, a lot of situations can be handled at a job owner level, right, by just, talking through, figuring out what's going on. The job owners have all been doing their jobs for a while and have seen a lot of situations, and we've come up with a lot of solutions. What we want to be able to do is start to drive issues down, to have that first conversation with the people who are going to be most impactful in identifying and then implementing the solutions to the problem, right? If it's for some reason the problem's, extensive, right, and needs and requires additional parties at National Grid and other departments and other higher levels to be involved, we do have a process internally to make sure that stuff does get escalated up to the proper people. That doesn't require, obviously Section 9 of the tariff, the ADR process is there and always available. But usually the same people get involved in those conversations. So it's a little bit quicker of a process for us to work through, less red tape, less other stuff that we have to end up getting involved. But we usually end up at the same solutions no matter what path it takes. So I encourage anyone who has questions, has issues, bring those up to your job owners. They've been trained and are very aware of this process. They know how to initiate it. They know the right people to loop into, helping to figure out the right solution. And starting at the right level of the company, right, just makes things a whole lot easier, right, and quicker, and the turnaround makes a lot more sense. So by all means, right, if things do get to a point where Section 9 is required, right, we are ready to have those conversations and work through it with everybody. But sometimes it may make sense just to ask that question first to your job owner, and then let them initiate the process and engage the right players inside the company. So just a little pitch for that. And then here very soon, I think in the next couple of months, we'll be, sort of posting a process doc around those escalations to bring a little bit more visibility, so people know, if something is initiated through this process, through the conversation with your job owner, what steps it takes internally to make sure it's being reviewed by the right people. So that'll come up, and we'll make sure to get that link out to everybody. Okay, so we are going to move into the Q&A. We actually have a large number of questions here at this point. Some of the questions that were asked, I believe, were answered during the presentation. I'm going to try to avoid those questions, just looking at time, as we are already at 11:37 here. We'll take the next 15 minutes or so, get through as many questions as we can, and then, as mentioned before, we'll be putting out a Q&A doc to make sure that we get all of these questions answered so people can see what's going on. So with that, I will kick this off with, so Jesse, I think, I'm going to need your help answering these ones, but the first one is talking about homeowners reaching out, inquiring about about their account to pay off their balances. And then in addition to that question, talking about a payment plan for those outstanding balances and payment plans for projects overall. So if you can take a shot at the simplified side of things, I'll jump into the complex payment plan.
Absolutely. Thank you, Will. So for the simplified process, a payment to date or payment arrangement will suffice for the case to move forward at any step of the process. So if you submit a case, we do the application review before we provide conditional approval. If there is an arrears on the account, then that case will be put on hold. But as long as the customer makes a payment to date or payment arrangement, then we'll be able to move that case forward.
Okay, great. So a little bit different on the complex side, right? Because we're dealing with much larger kayak payments overall there, but payment plans are always available on any payments that are over $25,000 for the kayak. So we actually even default to a 75% payment plan with anything over the 25%. If you are looking for an amended payment plan other than that 25/75, right, that's something that we can absolutely talk about once you receive the drafted ISA before you've signed it, right? Initiate that conversation. We can absolutely have that conversation. Per tariff, right, any payment plan needs to fit within the overall timeline, right, which we all know now is 180 business days, right? 60 for the first payment to be made, 120 business days for the second payment to be made, right? So, but we're willing to be able to look and chop that up into multiple different ways if that helps get the, certain work started earlier by having earlier payments. We can talk through what the options are. We look at each one of these sort of on a case-by-case basis because each scope of work is different, right? Different materials involved in that. Depending on when we have to order long lead time stuff, right? We can figure that out. So those payments may trigger certain steps in the process. So if the design stage needs to be started, right, we collect that first payment. We can figure out what the payment plan looks like, identify when we can initiate the design stage. But we do require 100% kayak payment to be made before any construction steps will take place. So, but payment plans are on the table and something that we are happy to discuss. So the next one, Jesse, I think you're still up on this one. It's talking about inspectors calling in against a work request number, right, and having some hiccups in that process, and the inspectors maybe not always being able to get through, or getting through and not seeing the change to the work request number.
Yep. Thank you, Will. So the inspectors do have 3 ways of submitting an inspection, right? They can either call the connections department at 1-800-375-7405. They could email their form to the connections department at workrequest@nationalgrid.com, or they can fax their form to the fax number that goes to the connections department at 1-888-266-8094. If I like to advise all my customers and developers, if your inspector states that they did clear this inspection, but we continue to advise that it's not cleared on the account, call the inspector, have the inspector physically call the phone number and speak to a live representative. This will ensure that that work order is cleared on the spot with the inspector on the phone. So because once they call that 1-800 number, they can go through the automated system, and 99% of the inspectors do that versus speak to a live rep. But I like to advise, speak to a live rep. If you've already emailed, if you've already called and went through that automated system, maybe there was a glitch somewhere, or that email maybe didn't come through, and so the connections department didn't get it. Maybe the fax didn't come all the way through, something wasn't visible. Call that 1-800 number, speak to a live rep, reference the work order number, reference the account address, and that will ensure that that work order gets cleared. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jesse. So there is a comment here around the Contact Us button, right? So I know that we've been driving people towards using the Contact Us button. A couple of quick comments around that, right? And the timeline it takes for people, for the company to get back on those questions. We endeavor to make sure that we address every one of the questions and the inquiries and get back. It could be a delay in time, right? Making sure that, you're being prompted, answering questions that then drive additional drop downs, additional prompts to direct the question to the right department or party. Making sure that answering those questions accurate overall, make sure it's directed to the right place. But with that said, right, I think there's an opportunity for us to spend a little bit more time deep diving the Contact Us button, right? How it's used, how to walk through it, maybe questions that pop up, and the process around once it comes in the door, National Grid, how do we direct it around and work through getting answers. So what we'll do is take that away here, and as part of whatever next seminar or webinar that we have, we will deep dive the Contact Us button, bring a little bit more focus and understanding to that functionality in the portal and that process that we have around that functionality. So more to come on that as we move through the next couple of months. JJ, I'm going to line you up here. Actually, I apologize. The next one is what is chatter, which I think I can take on my own here, right? So we heard that word said a lot. So chatter is basically the messaging platform that's in the portal, right? So it's snapshotted, date and time when that is. It's a running list of all the communication had between the job owner for the company and the customer, right, or developer, whoever is working in the portal. But it's basically a communication tool where everybody has access to anything that was said in the past. So we drive most of our communication through chatter into the portal, so people have access to it. But you do need to be logged in to be able to take advantage of that and enable that chatter feature. So just kind of keep that in mind. But very useful tool especially when it comes to projects being handed off, right? Coverages for vacation, keeping an understanding of where that project actually stands and to make sure that we know when those communications took place. So I think, so the next one is, why do people remove SMART? I'll direct everybody back to the chat for this. Jesse answered that question. But Jesse, I'm going to put you on the spot again around chatter guidance document listed on the website. Could you address that? Is that something installers should already have access to, or does it need to be registered?
Awesome. Thank you, Will. So in regards to the chatter guidance document, anyone who has access to Salesforce should be able to get into that document. It's just like any other document on the portal. You should be able to see any other link on the portal. You should be able to see. So as long as you do have a login, right, and your company is registered, then you should be able to get access to that form.
Great. Thank you. JJ, next one is going to be for you. It says the portal does not upload Word or PDF docs with screenshots of aerials. What type of document should be used? And then, can this be corrected?
Yeah, sure. So, thanks, Will. So I'll look and see if you can upload a Word document with the PDF inside of the Word doc and see how that attaches to the portal. I do not know if I've seen that before. Typically, if it's just going to be a screenshot for the site, you can upload just a bitmap or JPEG file into the Word doc and save it as a PDF. So it's just one PDF document versus forms trying to take two documents, two different types of files into one document. But you can reach out to me in chatter if you're having any issues during the pre-app streaming stages, and we can work. And if you have to attach them.
Thank you. I'm going to keep you on the spot here, JJ, as we continue to rapid fire some of these. But there are questions around behind the meter applications being put on hold, right, to provide a work request. Could you talk a little bit more around why work requests are required at that point of the process?
Yeah, so lately, behind the meter work requests, and there are multiple configurations. There are larger systems that are behind the meter but still require CTs and PTs because they're not self-contained. There are smaller systems that are completely self-contained, and then there are behind the meter, which doesn't even require a meter if it's a standard, QF net metering system or a QF AOBC system or anything like that. But lately, what we're trying to do is the meter service work request only that we have the customer obtain in the beginning is to allow CMS visibility and to be able to get them to determine if any metering changes to their system will be required. So we've had a couple of instances where we've had like a meter situation where it was like in the basement of a commercial building where there was no access, and we couldn't replace that meter for a new bidirectional one, and we required that to be relocated outside because there was service modifications. So that's to prevent any issues like in the middle of the in the middle of the customer building a system or anything like that. That way metering has visibility beforehand. It also says about the work request group. We're working with the work request group to come up with like a verbiage that way customers can provide the work request group this standard, and then they understand what type of work request and then move seamlessly from there.
Okay, thank you. Still on the spot, JJ. Talking about how projects, smaller and smaller size projects, are ending up in impact studies. Here recently, right? Can you discuss a little bit about the process that we go through in the screening to direct these projects down the appropriate path?
Yep, absolutely. So there are a lot of factors why a project needs to study, but the further and the longer we continue our interconnections, the more and more DG on our feeders creates a greater saturation in the area. Limits hosting capacity in a lot of areas. A lot of areas have group studies, which means that project would then need to fall behind. So, like When it comes to cost wise, there's so many factors in determining what an impact study is going to cost. It could be because of a feeder extension that the cost is high. It could be, if 3V0 protection is at a substation, if a recent study has been done in the area, if it's a CHP. There are so many different factors that go into determining the estimate for a study, and it's all based on engineering costs and how many hours it's going to take. So it's hard to answer that.
Yeah, I think in my mind, it's around the saturation levels that didn't exist years ago, right? So a lot of capacity, right? Less issues. So we were only really driving the 500 kW and larger projects down study paths. Now it's just that's not the case any longer, right? These smaller sites, because of the saturation overall, just have an impact, right? And we don't know what that impact is. And it may not drive system modifications. It may drive system modifications, and until we study it and understand what that impact is, we won't really know. And at the end of the day, right, National Grid is expected to keep the lights on. So what we can't have is a system attached to our power system without understanding how everything is going to interact and react. So it's important that we do take the time and understand even these smaller size systems, what that impact on the system will be. So thanks, JJ. And I think this is the last one I'll put you on the spot for, right? But it's around batteries, right? More specifically, the DC coupled batteries and why those are always going to study, and ES narratives are being required for that kind of work.
Yep. So all energy storage checklists and narratives are required to be filled out in their entirety for anything with any kind of storage. I'm not going to get into the specifics too much, but basically, you can size your DC projects between 1.25, 1.5 to 1 scale on the DC side of the inverter. I know DPAM, when they model and look at different types of ramp rates and charge, I don't want to get into too much detail about why we require them, but definitely need the ESS checklist and the narrative forms to be filled out in their entirety with anything requiring storage. With the DC couple batteries getting pushed to further study, it's not so much the DC couple battery projects with configuration. Will, it's just like you elaborated on the last comment. It's just like with the lack of capacity in the areas, with the amount of saturation we have in the areas, like a lot of the projects just require further study. And then obviously anything over 250 kW that requires a minimum of a grounding review also requires further study to model the grounding and things of that nature.
Thank you. So we got a couple more. We'll get those two banged out here, and then we'll call it a meeting. Thanks for everybody who has been holding on and continuing to hold on. But George Souza, this next one, and I'll make it a little bit more of a general question because it's a little bit project specific, but it's talking about not knowing or being able to find certain documents, right? Whether it's the ISO registration, the ATI, Schedule Z, meter installation confirmation emails, those type of things. We direct, in general, people the process on how to get help to find these.
Yeah, thanks. Well, generally speaking, the easiest way to contact anybody for any of those documents that are project specific are going to be to utilize that chatter function, and the job owner can certainly assist in getting the documents that you need, especially when it comes like those Mass Smart documents. That's going to be probably your easiest solution to get that information. Otherwise, we are trying to avoid using the distributed generation at nationalgrid.com email. But if you're unsuccessful using the chatter function, you can always use the contact us function on the portal. And then as a worst case scenario, you can certainly use that distributed.generation at nationalgrid.com email address to obtain those documents. And I believe most of those documents that were referenced in the question are available on the portal for download on any specific case as well. So if there's anything missing or anything that you need help with, by all means, reach out. We'll get that taken care of quickly for you.
Yep, and the one thing that I'll quickly add, right, is that, these documents become available at different points of the process. So just an understanding of what point in the process you are and what documents would be available at that time. So, obviously, something like an ATI letter, right, that won't be available until the very end of the process. So, just an understanding of where the project is, and that's something that the job owner, right, can absolutely help with as to when some of these documents pop up. But thank you, George. Last question I think we'll address here. So Jen, it's a group study question. I'm going to summarize it a little bit here because there's a lot going on, I think, with group studies overall, but this question is more around a project that is in queue behind a current ongoing group study. So can you talk a little bit about what that process looks like?
Yep, thanks, Will. So when we do have an active group study, we do put any subsequent applications that are applying into an asset in the common study area on hold. The hold reason would be behind pending, I think at this point it says behind pending study or behind pending ASO study. Currently, you could chatter on your case asking my team whether or not they can provide any additional information in terms of timelines. Please understand we would be able to give you a high-level status of the group study preceding your project. However, there are multiple reasons why there could be an imposition to a group study timeline. So if we let you know that the group study is active, maybe ahead of the 70 business day milestone that I referenced in our presentation, we do still have an ASO study that could add some variability, to the duration of that group. That said, we're happy to maintain communication with you and answer any questions you have throughout that whole process. Relative to your project progressing once the preceding group study completes, if we have 2 or more applications in a given area, and in this relative to the solution for the preceding study, if capacity has not been enabled that would allow multiple applications to progress, we may need to initiate a second group study. Again, that is a very high level answer, and it's more of an I'm not sure. The hope is that the solution for any particular group moving through the process will yield just organic enabled capacity. If we make some robust system modifications, we would have enough capacity to allow multiple applications behind that group to move through the process, whether there be with or without cost share involved. So more of a wait and see, but you could progress independently if there are no other applications, or you could be progressing with an additional group after the fact.
Thank you, Jen. So that takes us to the end of the questions. So again, we're about 30 minutes over, but we'll get done before noontime. We lost a few people along the way, but for everyone who stuck it out, we appreciate it. We will work to get this recording posted, and then over the next couple of weeks, we will work to get the Q&A doc. I know we ran through this kind of quickly, but we'll get that posted for any follow-up anybody may have. So appreciate everybody taking the time today. And our next regularly scheduled seminar is going to be in October. For those of you that were on the call back in April, we were hoping to get an in-person one this calendar year. Obviously, things did not work out here for July. We'll cross our fingers and hope that the next one could potentially be in person, getting back to more of the norm. So that's our goal, that's our target, and we will obviously keep COVID numbers and all that other kind of situation in mind as we start to make those decisions later on this summer. But that's our hope, and hope to be able to see a lot of people come October that we haven't had a chance to get in the room with over the last couple of years. But again, end of our presentation today, but we appreciate everybody taking the time. Thank you.